truth of the matter is, Woody Johnson, 80-year-old owner, I think he's done waiting and said, I don't see this thing, fixing itself. This team needs a spark now.
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I'm your host, Dave Helman, and if Week 6 is anything like the week leading up to it, we are in for a hell of a Sunday because, wow, what a news cycle. It's been 48 hours since the last time we were in your feed, and all hell seemingly broken loose in the NFL. We've had our first head coach firing. Robert Saleh let go by the New York Jets just 5 games into the season. Got Aaron Rodgers responding to that and the role he says he didn't play in it. We've got 3 starting quarterback changes, couple of those due to performance, 1 due to injury. New England is moving first-round draft pick Drake May into the starting job after a slow start by Jacoby Brissett. The Raiders are officially making the switch to Aiden O'Connell from Gardner Minshew. And Spencer Rattler, another rookie. We talk so much about Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, the 5th-round pick. Spencer Rattler will be getting the start for the New Orleans Saints after that oblique injury Derek Carr suffered on Monday Night Football. That's not even to mention Christian Wilkins, star Raiders pass rusher, out indefinitely with a foot fracture. Unfortunately, Nico Collins, the leading receiver in the NFL for the Houston Texans, he's going on injured reserve with that hamstring injury. More news than I know what to do with. That's just a smattering of what we've been dealing with here in the week leading up to Week 6. So, like I said, if the games live up to the news cycle, we should be having a ton of fun on Sunday afternoon and into the evening. So with that, welcome to the preview itself. We've got Greg Olsen hopping on later in the episode. I'm going to talk about a big game in New Orleans. Spencer Rattler officially named the starter for a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down there. Also, we're going to talk some Packers and Cardinals. We've got a Thursday night banger tonight between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. So much to get to, but to help me out with all of it, because there is a lot, as I just mentioned, our good buddy Peter Schrager hopped on earlier today. We covered a bunch of stuff. Maybe you heard. Jaden Daniels, the hot young thing, 4-1 for the Washington Commanders. They're traveling right across the Beltway to face the Baltimore Ravens in the early window on Sunday. We've got the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Detroit Lions in a rematch of that zany game from the end of the 2023 season. And oh yeah, who better to talk to about the drama in New York with Robert Saleh's firing, the promotion of defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich to interim head coach, Aaron Rodgers' role in this entire thing, what Woody Johnson might be thinking or looking for with where the Jets go from here. And oh, by the way, they are playing the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football in a game that could A, decide the lead in the AFC East, and B, decide where both of these teams go from here. So a lot to unpack this week with Peter Schrager. Really fun conversation. Check it out.
Back again with my man, Peter Schrager, live from the set of Good Morning Football to talk some Week 6 football. Oh, but you got the New York tabloids like this. I'm loving the setup here today. Yeah. Can we? So if you're not watching our show, Peter, with the Jets back page, is that the New York Post I see?
New York Post, the headline being "Jet the hell out, coach shockingly fired after terrible losses." How's that for a headline?
Okay, can we talk about that? Because look, I'd
love to.
I know that the Vikings game wasn't particularly beautiful, and I know that the offense has been a mess, but I mean, dude, 5 games in, Robert Saleh, 1 game under 500. Peter, they're playing for the lead in the AFC East on Monday night against Buffalo, and Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, decides this is the time. I mean, I would not have been surprised at all to hear that Robert Saleh got fired midseason a month ago. But week 6, shockingly early. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, I play these multiple roles. I could be pundit and give you my thoughts and my analysis. Then I can be reporter. I'm going to put the reporter hat on and empty the bag on what I got here. So he came to work. I talked to Salah at length this morning and yesterday, and he's not doing so hot. Because he's shocked. He was knocked on his butt on this thing. So showed up. They took the long flight back. They were in a funk after that loss. Obviously, everyone felt it. Prepared all day Monday for a game plan for a week from Monday against the Buffalo Bills, where if they win, they're in first place in the AFC East. And Monday goes seemingly normal. Everyone's like, all right, obviously there's tension, but nothing's, going crazy. And then Tuesday shows up and is told to go sit in a meeting with Christopher and Woody Johnson and then a few others. Gets in the meeting room and it pretty cut and dry. It's like, all right, we're ripping the Band-Aid off. Like you're done. And, there was a report that like he got carried out by security, like standard fare when you're, let go from a job. They'll often say, let's get all your stuff together and the security guard will take you. It wasn't like he was carried out of there. I don't have on any record of him firing Hackett. I know there was a story that came out late on Monday that like he was firing Hackett and then Rodgers laid on the tracks and said, no, fire Salah. I think everyone starts to go into these, alternative realities of what really happened. The truth of the matter is Woody Johnson, 80-year-old owner, I think he's done waiting and said, I don't see this thing, fixing itself. This team needs to spark now. And whether it was premature or around, I think even you said it to start this thing. Like if you told me midway through the season, fine. He's like, they're not winning with what's going on right now. The juice was off. So he decides to get a spark and goes to Jeff Ulbrich, who was a longtime 49ers player, a longtime Salah assistant, a guy that, has been Salah's, backup, mate and defensive coordinator. He gets the job. So it's not like they're firing Salah and they're saying, okay, well, now we're going to give it to a special teams coach. They're like, no, you're a defensive head coach. We're giving it to the defensive coordinator now to see if we can get that spark going. That's the key word, spark. And I think from the Jets ownership perspective, and I've spoken to sources on the Jets side of this thing, they loved Robert Saleh as a person. They love Robert Saleh as a guy. This is nothing personal. This is their way to show the fans that they are not waving the white flag and to salvage the season. They're actually doubling down on the people in the building who are there and saying, if this can get this team going and light a fire, that's what it needs. We're going to make this move. A million ways to dissect it. But yeah, 2-3, and they're outscoring opponents in their 5 games. And the next few weeks, it's a little difficult, but over the rest of the season, they have 10 more games on the East Coast, meaning that's favorable, and they have the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL. Their hardest part of the schedule is what they just got through with crazy primetime games and travel and short weeks and all this stuff. Now it kind of settles in, and Salah's not going to be the one leading them.
It's incredible insight from you. Love having you here to deliver that type of stuff. Now that you've done the reporter thing, can I get analyst Schrager for a second? Why, like everything you just outlined, it would make sense if they were like promoting some hotshot OC, like if Nathaniel Hackett was lighting the world on fire, or like if the New York Jets had a Ben Johnson in the building who was like a head coach in waiting sort of guy. But Peter, they don't. Like the defense has been the better part of this Jets team. So when you say spark, like I'm kind of struck by the irony that last year, you could argue the Jets stood pat for too long, and they rode the Zach Wilson train for way longer than they needed to. They didn't want to make a move after Rodgers got hurt. Now it kind of feels like they're doing it earlier than they need to, especially with the point that you just made about their schedule lightening up. Like, I don't know, based on everything I'm hearing, it sounds kind of like a panic move by Jets ownership a little bit.
I think it's fair for you to assess that. They would argue they've seen this thing going in a downward trajectory now for 2 weeks. Now, is 2 weeks a big enough sample size? I don't know. They're there every day. The body language between Rodgers and Saleh, not ideal. The media comments of Saleh after the Denver loss, when he was discussing the cadence of Aaron Rodgers in the red zone, and then Rodgers has to come back and say, well, no, how about you just hold players accountable? And then Saleh the next day has to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It might be big stuff in New York City and it might not be big stuff nationally, but all that stuff plays. And it felt like this team was going in the wrong direction. So the ownership rips the Band-Aid off. But to your point, you look at the numbers, that's the 32nd rushing offense in the league. Rodgers is having his worst season as a pro. Their offense can't move the ball in key spots. So is it fair to say, well, the defensive head coach has to be shown the door when the defense has actually been great the last 3 years? Probably not empirically, but you also have to say he's not the defensive coordinator, he's the head coach. So someone needs to take the fall. And unfortunately, it's not Hackett and it's not, it's not Todd Downing, who's the quarterback's coach, and it's not going to be Rodgers. So Saleh, the head coach, is the one who gets it. And I think it was early. I sure do. But I also think if things went bad against Buffalo Monday night, everyone would be calling for Saleh's head. So it's one of those deals where if it was not now, when? And they're trying to salvage the season.
That is a valid point. I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I think maybe it's a matter of when, not if. Like maybe this was going to happen regardless, but October 8th, still awfully early in this timeline. I'm curious. We don't have to do another week of Devontae Adams speculation. We'll see what happens with him. It sounds like he's not going to play versus the Steelers, but that's still a very interesting wrinkle. Like if Robert Saleh gets fired on Tuesday and within the next week or two, Devontae Adams does get traded to the New York Jets, it's hard not to run with the idea that Aaron Rodgers really is like calling most of the shots in that building. At least that's the optics of it, even if it's not 100% accurate.
Yeah. And the argument to that would be like, he didn't fire Robert Saleh. I know a lot of people think that he was the one who necessarily came out there and said, hey, like, let's get rid of this guy. That's not the case. So they made the decisions as owners. My heart of hearts, I feel bad for Saleh because he didn't get the contract extension. Everything was banking on this year. He never got that second contract from the Jets, and this is where it went down. And then you look at Rodgers, and it's like Saleh was one of those guys that was in that Malibu house, convincing him like to come and be a part of this team. And once you fly everyone out, GM, head coach, offensive coordinator, head coach, everyone flying out to Malibu to court Aaron Rodgers, you kind of cede your power to him a little bit. And in this case, the optics, they might be right that Rodgers has a bigger voice than most quarterbacks, but I don't think the ownership is making decisions based on Rodgers saying, do this, do that. Devontae Adams, interesting, right? Everyone just assumed he would be traded to the Saints or the Jets and it would happen overnight. Well, we're at Wednesday when we're recording this. I think Joe Douglas is still working on the phones, and I have a feeling Tom Telesco would be fine trading him for the right compensation, but you need two trade partners to make a trade. And, Adams, as Jay Glazer has detailed, and this is what I heard, Adams walked in last week and was like, I think I want to be traded to a contender. Trade me. And they're like, we just won. We're 2-2. Like, oh, okay. Like, all right. And now how many teams are clamoring for a 32-year-old wide receiver set to make like $14 million the rest of the way? I don't know. The list probably isn't that long.
Yeah, the market's always a lot smaller than you guess it would be, especially when we're still early enough in the season that there really aren't that many teams that should truly feel out of the race at this point. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. The irony is, it felt like all of the pressure, in my opinion, was on the Buffalo Bills in this Monday night game. They lose two ugly games in a row. You detailed this in your cheat sheet for foxsports.com. Like the vibes all of a sudden very bad in Buffalo. And maybe, I mean, maybe this news will be a lift for the Jets. Maybe, you often see teams respond to something like this, but has a way of taking the spotlight off of a Bills team that's in a little bit of turmoil right now.
It's so funny because, either way, whoever loses this game on Monday, it's like World War III in that fan base. And the Jets tried to, get ahead of it by firing their coach. But if Buffalo loses, now, you're 3 weeks away from being the number one offense in the league, and everyone's saying, Stephon Diggs who and Gabe Davis who, and then now it's 3 losses in a row, and it's not, the reinforcements aren't necessarily coming. So my point in my article that you can find on foxsports.com was that, it was all great in the beginning, but do they need a Diggs? And I'm not saying Diggs specifically. Obviously, that relationship went sour, but like, did the Bills miss the mark when their window is open right now and that the AFC East is wide open? And are we really relying on Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid and Mac Hollins as Khalid Shakir is hurt right now? Also, Brandon Beane, small comment a couple of years ago, was like, we're not looking to do the Rams all-in model. Like, we have a different long-term plan. Well, maybe they should be all in and say, this is where we have this core right now. We're not getting any younger. Fascinating division. And the Bills, why the Jets take all the headlines, the Bills are in a bit of a crucible right now too.
Yeah, maybe falling to 3-3 after starting 3-0 would change Brandon Beane's opinion about that. Yeah. We'll have to see. Okay, weird vibes in that Monday night game. I want to take it down to a game with amazing vibes. You talked about this in your article as well. Commanders at Ravens. I mean, not only would you have never picked this as like a marquee game of the week at the start of the season, but Peter, the vibes in Washington have been bad for so long. And look, I turned 36 this year.
Okay.
In my entire like remembering life, as long as I've been conscious of the NFL, I've never even thought of like the Beltway rivalry as a real thing. Like this just hasn't been a thing. It's been so long. You know, you had the blip on the radar with RG3 in 2012, obviously, but other than that, when you're talking about like sustained enthusiasm for the football team in Washington, D.C., this is as good as it's been since like 1991. And it's not an exaggeration to say that. I really don't think it is.
There's been blips, right? So Robert Griffin era was cool, but there was always this feeling because he got injured that it was so short lived. And he got injured during that season too. And Cousins had to step in that rookie year. Then there was that brief like 2020 push where, Heineke won a bunch of games late and it was like, all right,
Right.
that's it, dude. It has been barren. I think it's the best story in sports. And it's not just Jaden Daniels. To me, it's the entire organization. New owner, first of all, new logo, new uniforms, and then new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and then this bright, beautiful diamond of a quarterback who seems to exceed every expectation everyone's had, and everyone had huge expectations for him. So now they're in this big spot. Romo and Nance on the call. Like CBS is putting a lot of like eyeballs on this game in the 1 o'clock window. And I don't think there's any feeling that they're going to be suddenly scared of the Ravens or they're going to quiver. Like this is a team that's been playing really good football. And one of the parts I love about the way this Adam Peters team has been built, it was by design. You got Jaden Daniels, but in free agency before that, they added Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler, Frankie Luvo, like guys that are veterans who have been around. And who's the backup to Jaden Daniels? No one knows. Marcus Mariota, a former number 2 overall pick, who's a Heisman winner, who's been with him and in his ear this entire summer and this entire season, who is not looking to take his job and is not looking to want to like is there to be in a supportive complimentary role to Jaden Daniels and a big brother to talk to. So everything's built right and they're exceeding expectations. It's been awesome.
I'm not trying to do revisionist history. I'll go pull up the clips of me saying this in August. Like if Caleb and the Bears weren't taking up so much oxygen, and rightfully so, but we did all of that talking about what a good situation Caleb was in. The Commanders did a commendable job of building a nice situation. Like when you pick number 2 overall in the draft, the expectation is that you're not going to have a lot to work with. I agree with you. I thought Adam Peters and Dan Quinn did a phenomenal job of like building a baseline of a competent offense. Like the pieces were there.
Week 1, I was on the Fox kickoff show and we were talking about Caleb. And I said, if there's one team that I would circle who's like the CJ Stroud Texans this year, it's not the Bears, it's the Commanders because there's no eyeballs on it. And they actually have all this fresh stuff coming in. Like Eberflus is a holdover, Poles is a holdover, like Stroud and D'Amico. It's like that was like fresh. And it was like, all right, new paint cover. That's what it feels like with the Commanders.
I love it a lot. And I know the game's in Baltimore. It's not in DC. It's not at FedEx Field, but man, like I've spent a lot of time in that area. Obviously, the Cowboys play there every year. And like you talk about the upper decks being empty, the opposing fan base is usually dominating the attendance when they play the Commanders. I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to step out on a limb and say enthusiasm is at an all-time high, and I just imagine there are so many people in the DMV area that are coming back to this team after 5, 10, 15 years of like staying away or even outright giving up. I think it's got to be incredibly exciting for that region.
I love it. I feel it's so good and they've deserved it. That's a good fan base going back many, many years, back to George Allen, then through the Joe Gibbs stuff. And it's like, enjoy this moment. You don't get Nance and Romo or Brady and Burkhardt or Joe and Troy coming to your games too often. So enjoy this moment. It's a big one.
I'll just throw this out there. Lamar Jackson's playing like an MVP again, and all of Jaden Daniels' numbers compare favorably to what he's doing. So
let me ask you. I was debating this. 5 weeks into the season, is it fair to say Jaden is the MVP? Or are you thinking like Stroud or Lamar or maybe one of the running backs like Henry or something? To me, I think Jaden Daniels has been the story of the NFL this first 5 weeks.
It's hard for me to jump to MVP in week 6, but like if we the reason why is it's such a big assumption. Like there'll be some dips. Like it's not going to be this amazing throughout the entire season. Somebody's going to quote unquote figure him out. But like if Jaden Daniels plays this way for 80% of the season or all of the season or whatever, and the Commanders win the division, it has to be a real conversation. I mean,
Totally.
for me right now, I think the way Lamar's playing is
I know.
completely insane. Um, I mean, shoot, what Minnesota's doing, like somebody there deserves credit as
I
well.
get it.
But I mean, if Jaden can do this for an entire season, like it feels early to me just because I
I
know how
know.
hard it is for rookies to
Hasn't been
sustain
done
this.
since 57. Jim Brown is the only rookie to win MVP.
If they win the division and he plays like this all year, it's not crazy. It's
Yeah,
hard to
I agree.
imagine just because he's a rookie, but it's not crazy.
Agreed.
Uh, Late afternoon game
Mm.
down in Arlington, Texas. Tom Brady's on the call for Lions at Cowboys. And I just wanted to ask you, how long do you think we'll have to wait for a joke about Dan Skipper reporting as an eligible receiver in this game?
I'm touching my chest as we speak. The irony of that is there was so much ink spilled and blood shed over that whole play last year on that Saturday night game, which of course will be going down as the Jimmy Johnson Ring of Honor game. Um, in the end of the day, the Lions would go on and actually still get home playoff games, would still win two of them, and the Cowboys were bounced in the wild card round anyway. But like in the moment, we thought like, oh my God, Dallas is going to the Super Bowl. Everything's bouncing their way. This game is crazy. Somehow they win this game, and CeeDee Lamb has this amazing performance. But in the end, they failed again in the playoffs. But it almost makes that regular season game this weird anecdote in like NFL lore. But yeah, I don't know if any of the players, seem to want to relive those moments. That was a weird game. And what we thought was going to kickstart the Cowboys, it actually didn't. They actually lost in the playoffs in the first round.
Yeah, it's funny how many of the touchstone moments, and like, of course, there's only so many of these games. Of course, we're going to get excited for them, but
Yeah,
like Niners Ravens last year didn't wind up being a preview of anything.
no doubt.
Cowboys Lions felt like this big moment, and the
NFC
Cowboys
Championship game
flamed out.
preview. And it's like, no, Cowboys lost to the random Packers team. Yeah.
Cowboys Lions. I was talking about this last night on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Is like the Cowboys have won 6 in a row for starters, which is crazy because all of these games have been very competitive. But it's guaranteed to have some weirdness to it. Like you
Always.
had last year's thriller. One of my first Cowboy games ever was when Calvin Johnson went for 329 yards against these guys. They played a very controversial playoff game in the 2014
Oh,
season.
I know. There's a
You,
call or
you could
two that, yeah, sure.
you could take it all the way back to like Barry Sanders. I think Barry Sanders ran all over the Cowboys the year
Yeah, the Cowboys
before.
defender, number 75's back is turned on the play. I forget who it was. And I remember Matthew Stafford having one of his gutsiest wins or performances against the Cowboys. So that's a great, rich history. And of course, they're the two Thanksgiving Day teams. So you always think of them with that like holiday feel.
Valid point. We don't have to rehash the entire Cowboys Steelers game. I wonder, even with the turnover issues, I was so impressed by Dak in that game just because he was the difference. Like you go into that game and you're like, well, if the Cowboys win, it's because Dak's the best quarterback on the field. And even with all the mistakes, that's what happened. Now I just think this feels like such a different animal where I'm not trying to invalidate the Cowboys win, but the Lions are that much better of a team than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm dubious that Dak can do it again when you just like if you break this thing
I
down, I
know,
look
I know. It's like on paper, based on the last two wins for the Cowboys, just sneaking by the Giants and just like eking by. And then the way they won, it's like, can they really score enough points against this Detroit team, which comes in guns blazing off a bye? And it's like, no, then you learn week to week, like you can't predict this thing. So maybe that was what they needed. They needed to go to 1 in the morning and win another gutsy game, two on the road and away from the home crowd. Now they come back and like, this is the team we're supposed to do. Like, there's a million ways you can psych yourself up. But yes, on paper, this doesn't size up well for the Cowboys, especially with all the injuries.
Shoot, if they pull this off, like I said, I know he turned the ball over 3 times on Sunday night. If they pull this off, I'll throw Dak onto the MVP short list
Let's
because
go.
I can't think of a reason why they should win this game other than him balling out of his mind. All right,
Agreed.
really quickly, one last thing. We're recording this Wednesday for Thursday. Thursday night, division matchup, 49ers going up to Seattle. Niners hadn't lost to the Cardinals since 2021, Peter. They also haven't lost to the Seattle Seahawks since 2021. So feels real rough if the Niners, who have dominated this division for 2 years now, lose both of those winning streaks in the same week. Like, I try not to overreact to narrative stuff, but if they let
what
both
that
of
would
these
mean? It would
teams
mean they
beat them,
lost to the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks in the division too. And
0-3.
And that Rams loss was terrible. They were up 14 points with a Rams mash unit that might not win many games this year, and they just found a way to lose that. And then last week to be up again by 10 in the fourth and to lose. I said it before the season and got crushed for it. The vibes don't feel right in San Francisco. I wasn't there, so who am I to say that? I didn't go to training camp. It's like this guy from his couch, basically. But just with all the stuff in the headlines, and then to lose the way they've lost to the Rams and to these guys last week, the Cardinals at home, it's strange. They usually take care of business in these games with Seattle, especially on these Thursday nights. I have a memory of a couple of years ago, Kittle just dominating. But this one feels a little weird, and Seahawks coming off 2 straight losses. Maybe they like to right the ship as well.
It's easy to say that these losses have been fluky. Like you mentioned, the way they lost to the Rams and the way they lost to the Cardinals, like there is a fluky element to it, but it's hard to write that off because that's just not what we associate with the 49ers. I mean, they should have found a way to win at least one of those games, if not both of them.
Yeah. It's crazy that we're in this 2-3 zone. It's wild.
You talked to Robert Saleh. I know he said, the report that came down was that he's going to take some time off, but like if things keep going this way for the Niners, I mean, Shanahan's got to just be pressing that speed dial button incessantly, right?
It was a couple of years back when McDaniels got fired, I guess from Denver, and then by the playoffs he was working as some consultant role.
Yeah.
Saleh has 8 kids. He ain't going to Thailand like Kingsbury. But I also know he loves his golf. So we'll see how long it takes, but he will be a very, very valued defensive assistant to anybody who wants him for the stretch run. There's plenty of time for him to get his rest and relaxation and then hit that second gear.
I say you could play a lot of golf by Thanksgiving and still have a lot of football left over.
No doubt.
So something to keep an eye on. Peter, always love catching up with you, man. Have a great weekend. Have a great week 6.
I always love catching up with Peter about a bunch of different topics heading into the weekend. But let's drill down now on another of the biggest matchups of week 6. Sunday in the early window, right here on Fox. Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to New Orleans to face the Saints. Big NFC South matchup. Our buddy Greg Olsen will be on the call in the Superdome. He joins me now. And Greg, this game feels like the perfect encapsulation of how quickly life can change in the NFL. You came on the show a couple weeks ago to preview Saints-Eagles. Saints were 2-0. They were riding high. They were one of the big stories of the early going. And since then, let a couple games slip, lost at least one they probably shouldn't have. Then they go to Kansas City. They lose to the Chiefs on Monday night. Not only do they lose their starting quarterback, Derek Carr, for at least a couple games. Just feels like a reminder that things can flip so quickly in this league. How do the Saints rebound? Where do they go from here now?
It's so funny you say that. As I was prepping for our call, I was like, man, it just feels like yesterday we were getting ready. Week 3, they're hosting Philly. They're the toast of the league. Their offense scored 90 points almost, 90 points in 2 games, throwing the ball all over the place. Clint Kubiak coming from that Shanahan type system is, he's the next big hot coach, and they didn't play great against Philly. Philly really kind of changed some of their defensive metrics, played more 5 down, played more big, kind of suffocated that run and took the deep shots away for the most part. And, we were there in New Orleans for that loss, and they haven't won since. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. Obviously, Carr going out is critical. I mean, every team, but the thing that stands out the most to me, aside from the personnel, and yes, there's offensive line injuries, and now at quarterback, they're just not what we saw them do really well in the first 2 weeks. Under center, play action, throw the ball downfield, condensed formations, throw the ball in the middle, pre-snap motions, like all the things that they were doing amongst the best in the league and the highest rates in the league. All those numbers have come down. Less play action, less under center, less pre-snap motion, less. So it's just kind of interesting to see when they were having a lot of success weeks 1 and 2, their formula was very clear. And now the 3 weeks since then, they've kind of gotten away from it.
I remember when we previewed that Saints-Eagles game, we talked so much about the scheme and how offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak was helping the Saints offensive line, making life easier on them. I know they lost Eric McCoy in the early going of that game against Philly, but is it as simple as that? Like, a lot of changes on the offensive line, a lot of shuffling, but the whole point is to make life easier on your offensive line. Is it not? Is this something the Saints can fix, or is it simply a matter of trying to get healthier on the offensive line?
There's no question offensive line, kind of merry-go-rounds and movement. I mean, Lucas Patrick started as he was the left guard, and then in the Philly game that we did, McCoy gets hurt. He goes from left guard to center, and then the pieces all going around now. Landon Young is the right guard. He's filling in for the starter, Cesar Ruiz. So, there's no question that all of that stuff matters. But I would argue that the more my offensive line is struggling in pass protection and the more moving pieces that I have, the less drop back I want to do, the less shotgun I want to do, the more early down, under center, play action, all the things we've talked about ad nauseum on these calls. The formula really is actually better for a bad offensive line than it is, okay, we're going to put the whole game on the quarterback's shoulders because everything else around him is breaking down. It's actually counterintuitive. So I think to protect this young offensive line, to protect a young quarterback now this week in either Haener or Spencer Rattler, I don't know if you got to imagine Jake Haener's going to be the guy, but I guess there's some rumors that Rattler's getting prepared to play too. So we'll see as the week plays out. It's still early, but you're really, really young. They've got to be able to get in play action. They've got to be able to throw the ball downfield. Between Olave and Rashid Shaheed, they have a lot of speed. I have to imagine Todd Bowles is a great defensive mind. He's going to play 5 bigs. He's going to see what Philadelphia did to them, suffocating the run with that 5-man spacing and saying, beat us in drop back pass. And if I'm New Orleans, I'm saying I don't want to be in drop back pass, if at all. And I've got to be able to throw the ball downfield, and I got to do it against single high, zone, heavy run boxes, and let your young quarterback throw the ball over their head. If you just hand the ball off 100 times into a big front, it could be a long day.
Over on the other side, this Tampa Bay team feels like a strange, bizarro version of itself. I mean, I associate Todd Bowles with good defense, getting after the quarterback, making life difficult on the offense. Really, it's the Buccaneers offense that's been the story of this season. Baker Mayfield's playing incredible, 11 touchdown passes on the season. They've been humming more often than not. But this Todd Bowles defense still trying to figure some things out. I mean, I know injuries are a big part of it. Every team in the league is dealing with them. Maybe getting Antoine Winfield and Kalijah Cansey back can help, but this Tampa Bay defense has gotten gashed several times this season. What can Todd Bowles do to raise that standard of play?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look back at the last game, what Kirk Cousins was able to do against them on that Thursday night thriller last week, they could not defend the middle of the field. Now, they're getting a little bit more vanilla in their coverages with Winfield being out and some moving pieces like injuries on the back end. Whitehead went out injured in that last game, so we'll see how he's doing. As they're trying to figure out that back 7 and some of the depth and some of the rotations, you can see Bowles is not using the amount of variety, the amount of coverages. They are still doing a lot of pressures, a lot of zone pressures, single high, zone, cover 3. But when you bring an extra rusher, you only have 3 underneath defenders. And that's exactly where Kirk Cousins killed them. I mean, he threw for, I want to say of his 500 plus yards, like 370 plus of them were in the middle of the field. So that is the most valuable real estate. If you can't defend the middle of the field in the passing game, you're going to struggle in today's NFL. And that was their biggest issue amongst others, but that was their biggest issue against Kirk Cousins. So they've got to get that fixed. Now, is this New Orleans offense with a young quarterback, whichever guy it is it going to be Kirk Cousins? Are they going to be as precise? Is he going to be able to, you would have to imagine no. So that should help. but their front has to be big and physical and control the run game. You know, they're going to try to protect the young quarterback in New Orleans with that ground game, and allow that secondary to keep as many zone defenders behind them as possible and try to fill some of those voids that were just wide open against Atlanta last week.
Then there's the somber backdrop to all of this, which is this game is taking place amidst a very serious situation in Florida as Hurricane Milton is about to make landfall on the west coast of Florida, right in the Tampa area. Buccaneers got to New Orleans early this week to avoid the weather, wishing, hoping, praying for the best for everybody in the impacted area. And Greg, I don't mean this to sound glib. Obviously, we talk about football players compartmentalizing so much. Such a big part of this game is moving past adversity and blocking distractions out. But this is on such a different level when you're talking about a natural disaster and the area that will be affected by this storm. But at the end of the day, you do have to play a game on Sunday. How do you go about trying to compartmentalize this the best you can?
Oh, I mean, there's no question. This is a different animal now. And listen, I'm the first one to say you're paid a lot of money to do a job. There's no excuses. There's no distractions. But you're talking for a lot of people in the Tampa area. This is life and death. I mean, this is your entire life, not only your lives, but everything you own, your homes, your cars, your pets, your animals, like being in serious, serious trouble. And it's one thing, you know, for hopefully a lot of the families were able to evacuate as well. I've read conflicting reports about whether the team brought all of the family members also early to New Orleans. Did they just bring some? I'm sure some of the guys' families kind of just went, hopefully, and stayed out of the area. But even if the families aren't there, your homes are there, your belongings, you know, who's putting sandbags up, who's putting storm shutters, who's keeping an eye that your roof didn't collapse, there's a lot of unknowns. And unfortunately, the reality is, barring some sudden change of course or sudden change of storm strength, like when they get home to Tampa, whenever that is, when they get home to Tampa, it's going to look very different. And I think that unknown is very hard for these guys as you're preparing for what seems like such a big deal of an NFL football game. And it is, you take a step back and you say, is my home going to be there? Is my kids' belongings going to be there? Is their back? You know, it's just, that's real life stuff. So I think it's a very delicate and a very difficult situation that they're facing. And the entire city of Tampa right now, you know, obviously everyone's thinking, you know, how can we best support them?
Yeah, it's a big game with regard to the NFC South standings, but real life feels so much more important in situations like this. Just want to say one more time, our thoughts, our prayers, our best wishes for everybody in the impact area in Florida, everywhere else that might be affected by Hurricane Milton. Hopefully this NFL weekend can be some sort of reprieve or distraction from anybody dealing with that. Best wishes to everybody. And Greg, we hope you have a great call, man.
Always good to see you, Dave.
Game with a lot of really fun potential is happening in the early window right here on Fox. It's the Arizona Cardinals going up to try to continue their road success at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. Cardinals, one of the biggest, most surprising wins of Week 5, happened on the road against the San Francisco 49ers. They'll be trying to continue that success on the road against the Packers. They are the perfect candidate for on the road. It's presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. And, you know, I looked at this matchup, and considering they're both NFC teams, strange to think it felt like it's been a minute since Arizona went up to Green Bay. And wouldn't you believe that it's true? The last time this matchup happened in Green Bay, all the way back toward the end of the 2018 season, Josh Rosen and Chase Edmonds led Arizona to a surprising win against the Aaron Rodgers Packers. It's a game that would ultimately cost Mike McCarthy his job just a few hours afterward. Like, such a bad loss that Green Bay didn't even wait a day or two to rip that Band-Aid off. It happened later that night. So yeah, it's been a minute since this game happened at Lambeau. It's Kyler Murray's first ever trip to Lambeau. It's only the second Arizona Green Bay game since Kyler Murray got drafted, which hard to wrap my head around. I know he's still a young guy. It just feels like Kyler has been in the league a lot longer than he actually has. So a little bit, we can't call it an unusual matchup, but one we just haven't seen that often. And like I said, I think it's got really sneaky potential. You look at the standings, you scan box scores, maybe you don't think so. And I'm not trying to sell you that Arizona is this world beater, but very quietly, I do think the Cardinals have been running through a little bit of a gauntlet. 2-3, 4 of their 5 games, have come against 2023 playoff teams. Opened the season against Buffalo, Rams, the Detroit Lions, and just now beat the San Francisco 49ers. The one team that doesn't fit that criteria is the 4-1 Commanders, who are as hot as anybody in the league. So it's been a grind. 3 of their 5 opponents currently have a winning record. One of the ones that doesn't is the Niners team that we all still think very highly of. So maybe not the best team in the league. That's not what I'm trying to say. I do think the Cardinals are as feisty as I thought they'd be. And I was surprised to look and see that this was a 5.5 point line. Like, that feels like a large number to me. Now, having said that, Green Bay is a hard team to have a firm handle on. That's what happens when you lose your starting quarterbacks back for a couple of games. Jordan Love he's looked solid since he came back from injury, but things are still getting acclimated up and down. How healthy is he? How comfortable is he? All that stuff plays into effect. But this feels like the most full strength Green Bay team we'll have seen in a minute. Romeo Doubs is back at practice after that strange 1-game suspension. From the sounds of it, he wasn't thrilled with his role. He didn't wind up making the trip to LA because he just opted not to practice. Christian Watson, we're recording this early in the week, so we'll have to see, but Christian Watson was back at practice for Green Bay on Wednesday after missing time with that ankle injury. So it's at least possible that both of these guys play on Sunday. Obviously, already plenty of options for Jordan Love to choose from. Like I said, it sounds like Green Bay as close to full strength as they've been in a minute, which is exciting. 2 things I want to look at in this matchup. And number one is how Arizona deals with Jordan Love and that cast of pass catchers, that cast of weapons that Green Bay has. Because as surprisingly good as the results have been, and I think that's how I would classify it, like the Cardinals have had surprisingly good results for what they have personnel-wise, particularly on defense. We know this is not a star-studded Arizona defense, and the numbers tell you they are not doing much to affect the quarterback. The Cardinals are only pressuring the quarterback 25% of snaps. It's only better than Atlanta, second worst in the NFL. Surprisingly, though, they have 11 sacks on the year, which is not terrible at all. They get a sack 26% of the time they pressure the quarterback. So when they generate pressure, they often get home. It's just that they don't generate nearly enough pressure. And a fun stat that I found courtesy of Next Gen Stats, it takes them an average of 3 seconds from snap to pressure to get to the quarterback. It's the worst number in the NFL. So it's a long-winded way of saying when the Cardinals affect the quarterback, it's through hustle and grit and determination and some help on the back end from the coverage. They just don't have guys that win matchups one-on-one very often. That's not where they are in their team building phase just yet. Sounds like a recipe for disaster against a good offensive line, a mobile quarterback, and a huge cast of pass catchers. I'm hoping, just for the sake of fun, that Green Bay can put up some gaudy numbers in this game against like I said, a surprisingly good Arizona defense, but not one that should be able to hang with a top-tier NFL offense. Fortunately for the Cardinals, they have a shot to win this thing without an amazing defensive performance because as of yet, I'm not sold that Green Bay's defense is the real deal. Looks awesome on paper. 16 sacks is solid. League best 14 takeaways is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Obviously, Xavier McKinney out to an incredible start. Kudos to him. 5 picks in 5 games. Absolutely awesome. But when you look a little bit deeper than that, I'm not going to say I'm worried about the Packers, but there is reason for some concern. The numbers are perfectly average when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to explosive plays allowed. Packers have allowed 16 explosive runs this season. They are firmly middle of the pack at stopping the run. And that is what Arizona is best at. Even in games where Arizona has let the lead get away from them, they are committed to running the ball with James Conner and having Kyler Murray be an explosive part of that. You saw his 50-yard touchdown run against San Francisco. Defensive line, I would say, has underperformed relative to expectation in Green Bay, and you got a whole bunch of young linebackers that can be easily confused by a good run game, maybe some play action. When the Packers have played a team with competent quarterback play, we'll say, it hasn't always looked pretty. Obviously, 30-plus points, 400 yards allowed to Philly in week 1. And then the last two opponents, Minnesota and LA, have both gotten up above 370 yards. Minnesota obviously scored 30 points in that win at Lambeau. So I don't think this Green Bay defense is bad, but I do think Arizona can get some wins here. And I'm hoping this is a really fun game. I'm going to trust the Packers to win, but I said it at the beginning, 5.5 points feels like a big number to me. I see a Packer win by 5 or less. Maybe this is a 3-4 point game. Big potential for fun. I hope it follows through. Looking forward to that one. Early window right here on Fox. Time now for the Super Six, sponsored by DraftKings. We are here to help you make the best picks possible for the Super Six. You can find it at foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app. What's the Super Six, Dave? I'm glad you asked. If you're still unfamiliar, go check it out on the site, on the Fox Sports app. Essentially, you make 6 picks a week. Some of them are game predictions. Some of them are prop bets. You get all 6 right. You win big. It's a ton of fun. Makes following all the action on an NFL Sunday even better. Gives you a little extra skin in the game for 6 different things. I'm going to do my best to help you with one pick. We'll see how this goes. One of our props for the week is who will have the most reception yards in week 6. Is it Philly receiver A.J. Brown, Tampa's Chris Godwin, Dallas's CeeDee Lamb, or Detroit's Amon-Ra St. Brown? I went back and forth on this one a lot. There's a lot to be concerned about. Chris Godwin, he's competing with Mike Evans for touches. He's also playing a sticky Saints secondary. CeeDee Lamb is bound to get a lot of attention from everybody he plays, and Detroit beefed up their secondary this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, same situation. Deron Bland might be back for Dallas. On top of that, you got Trayvon Diggs to worry about. I don't love that. And that's why I'm going to go with A.J. Brown, which doesn't make me feel great. Cleveland has a nice defense with a lot of talented players, but a couple things come to mind here. One, A.J. has Devontae Smith coming back from injury as well. Both of Philly's receivers are going to play against Cleveland. So you've got somebody limiting the amount of attention you can pay to A.J. Brown. On top of that, I think the smart way, or at least maybe the best way for Cleveland to play Philly, is to stack the box and keep Saquon Barkley from winning this thing for the Eagles. Sounds like something Jim Schwartz would do, is trust his corners to play good ball and load the box on Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. But if there's one thing Jalen Hurts is willing to do, it's throw the ball up for A.J. Brown. You get single coverage, you get anything resembling single coverage, and he's going to lob it up for A.J. to make a play. And more often than not, A.J. Brown does. It was just last week Terry McLaurin went over 100 against the Cleveland Browns. I think A.J. Brown is going to do the same thing. Eagles are going to want to make a statement that, hey, we got our receivers back. We're back, baby. I like A.J. Brown to be the leading receiver. Thank me in advance. One more for you, special edition. We've got the International Super Six this week. Another London game early on Sunday morning. Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Chicago Bears. This one's simple. Who will have more passing yards? Jags quarterback Trevor Lawrence or Chicago rookie phenom Caleb Williams? I'm rolling with Caleb because the defense is in question. Chicago has a very nice defense full of young, star DBs. I don't trust the Jags doing anything against that. I do trust Caleb Williams to throw for a lot of yards against Jacksonville because that's been happening on a regular basis. 3 of Jacksonville's 5 opponents have thrown for 300 or more yards. The Bills could have done it too, but they were beating the Jags so badly that they called off the Dogs. So maybe lock is a strong word, but I think Caleb Williams has a strong chance to flirt with 300 or maybe even go above. I'm going with Caleb. I feel really good about it. Those are my 2 Super 6 picks for the week. That just about does it for the Week 6 preview, but not quite. If you've made it this far, you're probably familiar with the bit by now. Here on the NFL on Fox podcast, we like to run through the rest of the slate as efficiently as possible here at the end of the show. So much to get to in an NFL Sunday. Not going to take up too much more of your time, but we're going to run through it as efficiently as we can with what we call the hurry up offense. I'm going to run you through the rest of the matchups that we have not talked about, give you just a little nugget, something interesting for you heading into the weekend to make you as prepared as possible for all of the action on Sunday. My producers are going to put 2 minutes on the clock right about now, and I'm going to do my best to take us through the rest of these games. Let's start it with the Texans and the Patriots. I never would have imagined this would be at the top of our rundown, but this game becomes immediately more interesting with the fact that Drake May is making his first NFL start. The number 3 overall pick will start at home against Houston. Interesting week to do this, New England. The Texans are 4th in pass rush win rate. Maybe you've heard of Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Patriots are dead last in pass block win rate. Best of luck, Drake. The Sunday night game, Bengals at Giants. New York leads the league in sacks. They got 22 of them, but Joe Burrow is top 10 in the league at avoiding sacks. He's getting sacked on just 5.8% of his dropbacks. If the Giants can't get him on the ground, I don't think they can win this game. Speaking of sacks, Browns at Eagles. One huge issue with Philly so far this year, they can't rush the passer. 6 sacks and a bottom 5 sack rate. It's been abysmal. But you know what's a good fix for that? A Browns team that's allowed 7 more sacks than anyone else in the NFL. Sack rate of 12%. When Deshaun Watson drops back, he's getting sacked 12% of the time. That's unacceptable. We'll see what happens there. Colts at Titans, my favorite dumb stat in the league. Colts wide receiver Alec Pierce is 11th in the league in yardage at 368. He's tied for 95th in catches. Talk about a big play threat. Michael Pittman is out for the Colts, so maybe a chance for more volume for Alec Pierce. Chargers at Broncos, 2 of the 3 best scoring defenses in the league. The over-under is 35.5. I'm taking the under if it's me. Steelers at Raiders. Raiders have officially switched to Aiden O'Connell. That'll be interesting to watch. I want to say this name on the show. Shout out to Robert Spillane, Raiders linebacker, tied for the league lead in tackles with 54. He's the only player in the NFL with 10-plus tackles in every game. And wrapping it up, Falcons at Panthers. Panthers don't rush the passer, and they give up passing yards. I can't wait to see what Kirk does for an encore after going for 500 the other night. That does it for the Hurry Up offense, and that does it for our Week 6 preview. As always, we will be back on the other side of the weekend. We will be breaking down all of the fun that happened on Sunday. We'll be talking to our analysts in the booth, guests, insight from every bit of the action, everything you need to know coming out of Week 6. Look for that in your feed on Monday morning. Subscribe on Spotify if you haven't. Go find us on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you get your pods, we will be there to break down all things Week 6. As always, we appreciate it so much. I will talk to you all soon.